Good afternoon once again, my ECO 2301 students. This is going to be our second recording for this course. The last time I recorded chapters 1 and 2 and the introductory part that I went through the syllabus. So that recording was posted already. There's a link at Canvas. You go to Canvas again, you go under course modules and you scroll down. You're going to see links to video recordings. So we completed chapters 1 and 2 already. So today I want to start chapter 3, which is a chapter on demand and supply. Okay. So I'm going to open my screen here, share my screen, then I'll talk about it on the other side. Okay, so here's chapter 3, which is a chapter on supply and demand. And here's going to be the learning goals or outline for this chapter. We're going to talk about the demand curve for oil, but you can talk about the demand curve for any product. We shall talk about the consumer surplus. Then we shall discuss what shift the demand curve left or right. And then we shall also going to be talking about the supply curve for oil. We'll talk about the producer surplus because the supply curve is derived from the producer surplus. And then we'll talk about what shifts the supply curve. Okay. Then in the following chapter, chapter 4, we're going to talk about the concept of equilibrium when we put supply and demand together. But before I start, I just want to make one general comment here is that the demand and supply model is perhaps the most powerful model in economics. Because when you look at anything around you, everything you buy, it comes from some kind of market. The market for cereals, the market for computers, the market for cars, the market for oil that we just talked about. So every day, so in every market, the market is always going to be represented by two sides: the buyers of the product or the consumers of the product, and then the sellers or the producers of the product. So these two groups meet in a marketplace to trade. So consumers, as you know, we always like lower prices, and then producers or sellers will want higher prices because the goal of any business is to profit maximize. So you profit maximize when you're selling your product at a relatively higher price. But consumers want to maximize their satisfaction of goods and services, and they do that by when the prices are falling. So consumers tend to buy more of the good when prices are low. And while sellers want to sell more of their products anytime the price rises. So anyway, so let's start our discussion here. We're going to start with so as I say, supply, demand, and the idea of equilibrium are the most important tools in economics. They're going to explain how prices are determined in a marketplace. So changes in demand and supply can plunge an economy into a recession or can set off a booming cycle. So when the economy is, let's think about like what happened during the Great Depression of 1929, 1933, people stopped buying products. The demand was very low. Okay. But sometimes when the economy is going through a booming cycle, that means there's excessive demand. Consumers want to buy things at a much rapid rate. Let's move on here. So I'm going to start with the demand curve. So the demand curve is going to be a function that shows the quantity demanded at different prices. The quantity that buyers are willing and able to buy at a particular price is what we call quantity demanded. Okay. So when you're talking about the quantity, let's say I'm willing and able to buy 10 gallons of gasoline. That 10 gallons of gasoline represents the quantity demanded that I'm demanding for that product. So quantity demanded is a quantity that buyers are willing to and able to buy at a particular price. So let me give you an example here on the demand for oil. So you could think this could be the quantity of oil in terms of the barrels of oil. So you can see when the price is $55, the quantity that people demand maybe 5 barrels of maybe billion barrels of oil or million barrels of oil. And then when the price drops to $20, you see quantity demanded goes up to 25 barrels of oil. And then when the price again drops to $5, you see people buy even more. So what do you see the relationship there between price and quantity? That relationship you're seeing there is what actually we call the law of demand. Okay, so the table is telling you that when price rises, price of oil goes up, quantity demanded, so when price of oil falls, quantity demanded rises, and vice versa. That means if the price were to rise, the quantity demanded would fall as well. Okay, so there's an inverse correlation between the price of a product and the quantity that consumers are willing to demand. So inverse relation between quantity demanded and price. So we call this a demand schedule. Okay, so so we can plot these points on a graph. So typically when we're showing the relationship between price of a product and the quantity that consumers want to demand, we always put price on the vertical axis. Okay, so we're gonna plot these points so you can see clearly when the price is $55 here, right? So quantity demanded is going to be 5, just like it's depicted in the table here. And then when the price falls to $20, you can see quantity demanded is going to increase to 25, maybe 1,000 barrels of oil. And then you can see when the price further falls to $5, per barrel, you can see that the quantity demanded increases to 50. So when you join those points, these points that you're plotted, you come up with a downward sloping curve, which we call it the demand curve. So the demand curve is going to show you that inverse relationship between the price of a good and the quantity demanded of the good. Okay, so it's pretty straightforward. And again, if you move up the demand curve, let's say you move from this point, you could call this point on the demand curve, like you can call it point A. You can call this point B. You could call this point C. So if you move up the demand curve, that means price would be rising. That means if you move from C to B, that means and price went from $5 to $20, then that's going to lead to a decrease in quantity demanded from 50 to 25. And you further move up the demand curve from, say, point B to point A, that means price rises from 20 to 55, then quantity demand is going to further reduce from 25 to 5. So it goes either way. So it's an inverse correlation between those two variables. And this is before I even go further, it's very important when you look at the behavior of consumers, of buyers in a marketplace. Okay, let's say someone was shopping for a car, like a Ford F-150. The first thing, the most important determinant of demand is price. Before you go buy a Ford 50, the first question that comes into your mind is that how much does it cost? Which is the price. That's the thing that comes in the mind of any buyer of a product before they go to the marketplace to buy it again. So the price seems to be the most, but not the only determinant of demand. Okay. So then one thing I want to make very clear here, anytime the price of a good changes, the goods on price, like the price of oil is changing, whether decrease or increase, you are going to be moving along the same demand curve. So we call that that result into a change in quantity demanded. Okay. Later on, I'm going to talk about other factors that affect demand, because price, even though price is the most important determinant of demand, it is not the only determinant of demand. So anytime price changes, we call that a change in quantity demanded, because people like consumers are going to demand more quantity of goods and services. But we're going to see that there are other factors that I'm going to discuss later, like income, for example. When the income of the buyers are changing or are rising, for example, this entire demand curve is going to shift to the right. So once income changes, but not price, or any other factors change apart from price, and which is shifting demand curve, we no longer call it a change in quantity demanded. It's going to be just a change in demand. So I'll explain those 2 points shortly. Okay, so a demand curve can be read horizontally, or it could also be read vertically. Okay, when you're reading it horizontally, at a given price, you're basically showing how much are people willing to buy. But you're reading it vertically, and that means what are people willing to pay for a given quantity. So if you look at this diagram here in the next slide, So this basically saying when you're reading this demand curve horizontally, that basically means that this is the quantity people are willing to, buyers are willing to pay at that price. And then when you can also read it vertical, that means at this quantity, buyers are willing to pay what? $20. So you can read it vertically or horizontally. Horizontally, you're reading the price. Vertically, sorry, horizontally, you're reading the quantity. Vertically, you're using the what? You're reading the price. So the vertical reading, the maximum price that buyers are willing to pay to purchase 25 million barrels per day is $20 per barrel. That's what you're going to be reading here. So these numbers on the horizontal axis are millions of barrels that per day that consumers are buying. Okay, so that means 25 million barrels, which are demanded per day. Consumers are willing to pay $20 for it. That's the maximum they're willing to pay. So just do a couple of self-checked here. So what quantity is demanded at $15? So this is pretty straightforward. So what at $15, price was on the vertical axis. So 15 lies between 10 and 20. So 15 is around here. So we draw a line across, you're gonna hit the demand curve, then we'll read that quantity down here. So that seems like it's gonna be 75. The correct answer should be, no, sorry, I made a mistake. No, it should be 50. I'm sorry. I drew my graph in a weird way. So this should come down here. Yes. So it's 50. Okay. And again, when somebody asks you how many buyers are willing, what quantity is demanded at like say $10, you're gonna draw a line across. So that's gonna seem like kind of like that. No, it's gonna be somewhere in the middle. It seems like it's going to be like 75, something like that. Okay. And then what about 20? You just draw a line and hit the demand curve. You read the quantity down here. Okay. So that seems like 25. Okay. Okay. At what price would $100 be, 100 be demanded? At what price? So here we have to read it vertically. So you want to look at it at the quantity of 100 barrels. What is the price that that is going to be paid for this? So you draw a line across and you connect it this way. So this seems like $5. Yeah, it's $5. See? So people are willing to pay $5 per barrel. You know, when the quantity demanded is 100. They'll be paying each. That means each barrel is going to cost you what? $5. Okay. A demand curve is negatively sloped, as I already talked about it. So the lower the price, the greater the quantity demanded, and vice versa. And this is actually what you could say, you could call this the law of demand. I want to open a slide here and basically define it properly. Let me put a new slide there, show you something here. Okay, so we call this the law of demand. The law of demand. The law of demand says that, now we can say, there's a Latin word, we can say ceteris paribus. I'm going to talk about what that means. Ceteris paribus. It's all here. Ceteris paribus is a Latin word that means all else equal. Or when all other factors constant, an increase in the price, an increase in price leads to a decrease in quantity demanded. In quantity demanded. And vice versa, or you can say it in full that, and a decrease in price, leads to an increase in quantity demanded. Quantity demanded. That's the reason why the demand curve slopes downwards, because of the law of demand. Okay, the law of demand again, ceteris paribus, which is a Latin word. The Latin word ceteris paribus means all else equal. When you all other factors that might affect demand, and you only look at what happens to price and how consumers react to that, you come up with a law of demand that an increase in price, holding other factors constant, like consumers' income is not changing, maybe the quality of the good is not changing, and other factors that could affect demand are not changing except price. So when price goes up, that leads to a decrease in quantity demanded. And when price decreases, that leads to an increase in what? In quantity demanded. That's a law of demand, which you can see is clearly represented in what? In the negative relationship between price and quantity. The demand curve is negatively sloped. It's a negative slope. Okay. So that's what I mentioned here. So demand summarizes how consumers choose to use a good, given their preferences and given the possibilities of a substitution. If they can so the idea here is that most goods that consumers are using or are buying some may have close substitutes, some may not have close substitutes, some may not. Like, for example, I'll give you one example, like insulin, which many people who are diabetic patients, they cannot do without insulin, because insulin may not have a lot of substitutes out there, or it may not have any substitute at all. So if there's an increase in the price of insulin and somebody needs that insulin, they don't have a choice. But, to buy, they are supposed to probably going to buy almost the same quantity. Or if they're cutting, they're going to cut back just a little bit. But if you take a good, like some other good, which has got very close substitute, like tea and coffee, we believe tea and coffee could be substitutes. Substitute means that if you're using one of those goods, you should not be, that precludes you from using the second good. Yeah, I've not seen anybody drinking coffee and drinking tea at the same time. That's not possible. Okay? So if the price of coffee increases, that could force the consumer to buy more tea if the price of tea remains the same, because tea and coffee are substitute. You could think about like maybe Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola could be substitute. So if the price of Pepsi goes up, okay, consumers are going to reduce the consumption of Pepsi-Cola, and then they're going to buy more Coca-Cola, whose prices might remain low. So consumers can switch away. Okay, that's what we're talking about, the possibility of substituting goods. All right, so let's talk about consumer will buy more oil at lower prices than at higher prices. We already know that. Okay. When the price is high, consumers will use it only in its most valuable uses. See that? When the price is very high, such as we use oil in airplanes. Okay. But if the price is very low, consumers are going to misuse it. They're going to buy it and use oil for anything they want to use for. Okay. So that's what I'm saying here is that, as the price falls, consumers will also use oil in its less valued uses, like heating and rubber duckies, right? Right. So that's why, when something becomes expensive, you only want to use it for its most valued, look for the most valued use for that product. So that leads me to a discussion, what we call the demand curve is actually derived from what we call the consumer surplus. So what is consumer surplus? The consumer surplus is the difference between the price that the consumer is willing to pay for a good and the price that they actually pay for, the market price that they actually pay for. For example, if you have 10 consumers in the marketplace, like say a market for chai tea, let's say somebody's a good loved chai tea, maybe they might be willing to pay up to $6 for a cup of chai tea. But after going to the market with chai tea to buy chai tea, they actually, at Starbucks, they actually find that the price of chai tea was only $3. So the difference of what they were willing to pay, which is $6, and what the actual price turns out to be $3, is what we call the consumer surplus. Consumer plus surplus is a benefit that consumers derive from participating in the marketplace. Okay? So that means if the price of chai tea rises, the consumer surplus is gonna shrink, get smaller. Let's say the supply, let's say I was willing to pay $6 for a cup of chai tea, and chai tea now costs $4 instead of $3. So my surplus, only consumer surplus, would only be $6 minus 4 would be only $2. Previously it was $3 because the chai tea was $3, okay? And I was willing to pay $6 for a cup of chai tea. And we remember that the willingness to pay for a cup of chai tea varies from consumer to consumer. While I may be willing to pay $6 for a cup of chai tea, some individual out there, maybe say John, might be willing to pay up to $5. So that means if the price of chai tea goes above $5, John is not going to buy chai tea. Okay? Or some individual called Sarah might be willing to pay only $2 per cup of chai tea. But the chai tea turns out to be $3. That means Sarah never buys chai tea. Okay? So the willingness to pay for a product, how much we are all willing to pay. You take 20 consumers who are willing to buy a product, their willingness to pay varies from one consumer to the other. Okay? So let's talk about that. So how do we represent the consumer surplus in a diagram? It turns out that the consumer surplus is going to be the area of the triangle below the demand curve but above the market price. Okay? So the idea here is that this would be the max. So $80 you're seeing there, which is the intercept for this example, that's the maximum price of a barrel of oil that someone was willing to pay for. Okay? And then you can see that the price of a barrel of oil turns out to be $20. Okay? So what is consumer surplus again? Is the maximum amount that somebody was willing to pay for a good and the price that they actually pay. And when we sum across all consumers in the marketplace, because the demand curve, this is a market demand curve, we're looking at the area which is like green, this area here, the area of this triangle here. Okay? So let me repeat that again. The consumer surplus is measured by the area of the triangle which is below the demand curve but above the market price. Okay? Because the demand curve is going to touch the what? The vertical intercept. And then let's say this is the price, the market price. So now you guys know how to calculate the area of a triangle. The area of a triangle you take is base times height divided by 2. That's right, half base times height. So the base of this triangle for this, when I ask you to calculate this consumer surplus, the base of this triangle runs from here to here. So it's actually 90. And the height of that triangle runs from 20 to 80. So the height is 60. So that means the area of the consumer surplus is going to be the base, which is 90, times the height, which is what? 60. Runs from 20 to 80. That is a difference, 60. Divide by 2. Okay? So if I 2 goes there once, 2 goes there what? 30 times. So 30 times 990, that is going to be 2,700. So that would be the size of the consumer surplus in this case. Okay, so for this example, what is the consumer surplus here? If the market price is 10. So we know that when the market price is 10, you know, from 10 here, you draw a line across until you reach the demand curve. You reach the quantity here. So the consumer surplus is the area of the triangle, the area below the demand curve, a triangle which is below the demand curve and above the market price. It's going to be this triangle here. Okay, so the base of that triangle runs from 0 to what? To 70. So that's 70. And then the height runs from 10 to what? To 30. So the consumer surplus here is going to be base times the height divided by 2. That's the area of the triangle. That's how we calculate the area of a triangle, which is going to be the same as the base here is going to be 70 times the height, which is what runs from 10 to 30. That is 20 divided by 2. So 2 cancel here, goes here 10. So that's going to be 700. So the correct choice would be B. Okay. That is how you calculate the what? The consumer surplus. Pretty straightforward. So now, let's talk about shifting the demand curve. Now, I want to discuss the two concepts that might not be clearly discussed in your textbook, but I want to take it a little further so that you get a complete understanding of of the demand curve. So there are two conceptual issues on demand, which I want to talk about here. You pay much attention here. So there's a difference between a change in quantity demanded versus a change in demand. Those are two different concepts. The first one, a change in quantity demanded, is due to a change in price, a change in the goods on price. It's due to a change in the goods on price. And is represented by a movement along the same demand curve. A movement along the same demand. DD is going to be my notation for demand. So demand, DD, demand curve. When we're talking about a change in demand is a shift of the entire demand curve. A shift of the entire demand curve, and is due to changes in other factors which affect demand, rather than price. Because there are so many things that will make a consumer buy less or more of a good. It's not only price. Well, for example, what about if you win a lottery? If you win a lottery or you get a very good paying job, that means you're most likely going to buy more products, regardless of whether the price is change or not. Or is, let's say, if the quality of the product increases, is more favorable to the consumer, they will learn because of the quality improvement. Consumers are more inclined to buying more, regardless of whether the price stayed the same or not. Okay, so we can represent these two concepts in a diagram. So I want you to pay attention to what I'm drawing here. So I'm gonna discuss all of them in one graph. So if I draw this graph like this, I'm gonna put my price, remember, always goes on this one, on this axis, and quantity goes on this axis. We read quantity horizontally, price on the vertical axis. So I'm gonna draw my demand curve here, label this D1, the first demand curve. And I say, okay, let's say there's a price here. We can call this P1, the initial price. You draw a line, you hit the demand curve, you're gonna read the quantity down here. You can say this is your Q1. Okay, that price could be any number, like $20, could be anything. This is just for illustration purposes. So now let's label this point. Let's call this point A. Now, suppose price falls to P2. So the price has fallen. From the law of demand, you are going to move along the same demand curve. Because price has fallen, consumers are the quantity demanded is going to increase from Q1 to Q2. So in other words, you move from point A to point B. This is what we are calling a change in quantity demanded. Specifically, it's an increase in quantity demanded. Like you see what the definition says? A change in quantity demanded is due to a change in the goods on price and is represented by a movement along the same demand curve. See, we move along the same demand curve when the price change. And the converse will be true. If let's say, suppose we move from point B to A, that means if price goes up instead from P2 to P1, that's going to lead to what we call a decrease in quantity demanded. We invoke the word quantity. So anytime we're saying that, or there's a decrease in quantity demanded, that means that is due to an increase in price. And when you say there's an increase in quantity demanded, like we've seen here, from Q1 to Q2, that means that is due to a decrease in the price of the good. But remember, consumers could also increase their demand for this good from Q1 to Q2 without price changing. Okay? So let's say the price stays the same at P1. Price did not change. But so I'm going to draw a dotted line here up to somewhere here, then bring that down. So that means something else happened. Okay? That means this entire demand curve is going. I'm going to label this point C. I'm going to draw there's going to be a new demand curve. The demand curve is going to shift to the right, to D2. Okay? So you can see price has not changed. Price from A to C, price stayed the same. But consumers increased their demand from Q1 to Q2. So that means what is making consumers buy more of this product is not price. It's going to be things that I talked about. Maybe the consumers are becoming wealthier. Their incomes have gone up. Maybe the quality of the good has gone up. Okay? Maybe there's an increase in the number of consumers, or the population size has gone up. Okay? When the size of the population in an area goes up, they demand more of the good. Okay? So see that? Okay. And the converse is going to be true. This demand curve could shift to the left too. So this shift in the demand curve from A to C, when the demand curve shifts to the right, that results into a change in demand. We no longer invoke the word quantity. So anytime you're shifting demand curve because it is due to other factors that affect demand rather than price, we're now going to say that this is this leads to an increase in demand. You don't invoke the word quantity. So a movement from point A to point B is due to a change in price. You're moving along the same demand curve because price went down. So that we call the movement from A to B an increase in quantity demanded. But a movement from point A to C, we just say it's an increase in demand. You don't invoke the word quantity anymore. Okay? And again, when we move from point B to point A, let's say that's due to increase in price. Okay? Consumers are going to buy less. See? So that is what we call a decrease in quantity demanded. But if we move from point C back to A, that means the demand curve shifting to the left. Well, that could be due to maybe consumers' income have decreased. When consumers' wealth is decreasing, they don't buy as much. So, and price has not changed. In that case, you move from point C to point A, the price has stayed the same. That means the consumer is decreasing the demand, not the quantity demand. You don't use the word quantity anymore. So I want to make sure that those two concepts are clear. There's a fundamental change between a change in the quantity demanded. A change in quantity demanded, again, involves movement along the same demand curve and is due to a change in price. Meanwhile, a change in demand involves shifting the entire demand curve. It is due to changes in other factors which affect demand rather than price. So when we hold price constant, consumers might buy less or more, maybe due to changes in factors that might make them do so, like changes in income, changes in the quality of the product. Okay. So having said that, now what we're going to do next, we want to start discussing these factors which are responsible for shifting the demand curve either to the left from A to C, so to the right from A to C, or to the left from C to A. What are those factors that, even though price has not changed, consumers want to buy more or less? What is driving that? That's what we want to talk about next. So that's exactly what I'm talking about here. an increase in demand, see, is illustrated with a shift of the entire demand curve to the right. That means a decrease in demand means the demand curve will shift to the left. So let's talk about this, whatever. So decrease in demand shifts the demand curve to the left. And at each price, people are willing to buy less. At each quantity, people are willing to pay a lower price. That's right. And then this is what? The case of a decrease in demand. Decrease in demand, see that? Yeah, no. So I talk about this is a case for the increase in demand here. This is a case for the decrease in demand. I already talked about it here. See, the demand curve shifts to the left. Okay, so now let's discuss one by one factors that shift the demand curve, which lead to people demanding more goods, even though the market price may not have changed. So the first one is going to be income. So here I want you to pay a little bit of attention. So there are two types of goods out there. Okay, so we're going to look about how, let's discuss income factors which shift the demand curve. So we say the first one is income, consumers' income. And under income, I'm going to break it into two parts. Income is going to affect demand depending on whether the good they're buying is a normal good or inferior good. So let's start with normal goods. So normal goods, these are goods in which the consumer or the buyer increases demand when their income goes up, and vice versa. Okay, so that means if the income of the consumer goes up, they buy more of the good. Vice versa means if the income of the consumer decreases, they're going to buy less. So that means for normal goods, so therefore, for normal goods, the demand curve shifts to the right when income rises, and shifts to the left when income falls. Okay, so if we go to draw this, yeah, you can see what we're talking about here. So this is what, so for normal goods, you're gonna have something like this. Say normal goods. So you have P here, you have quantity here. So let's say this was the initial demand curve, which is D1. And let's say this was price P1, Q1. So remember, we are holding price constant, and the demand curve is shifting to the right, to D2. See, so that's going to lead to an increase in quantity, increase in demand from Q1 to Q2. So demand curve shifts to the right. This for increase. So when what about if the income decreases? If the income decreases, then the demand curve is going to shift to the left like this, to like D0. So consumers would reduce, because we can level this Q0, something like that. So a decrease in consumers' income will shift the demand curve to the left. It leads to a decrease in demand, okay? and an increase in consumers' income will shift the demand curve to the right, okay? And this is the case for normal goods, okay? So, but not all goods are normal goods, okay? Sometimes the goods can be what we call inferior goods. So B, if a good is not a normal good, then they better be what we call inferior goods. So inferior goods. So inferior goods, these are goods where the consumer decreases demand for them when their income goes up. So think about any good which you could decrease the buying when you're in, let's say you win a lottery. Some of you win a lottery, right now you might be driving a Honda. Okay? So you win a $20 million lottery, you might start driving a Lamborghini. You might quit driving a Honda. So to you, the Honda would be an inferior good. Oh, let's say somebody was eating fast food when their income was low. When they were students, they only eat a lot of fast food, cheap food for fast food. And when they win a lottery, their income goes up, they're going to go to a decent restaurant, maybe to a steakhouse. So in that case, that you regard fast food as an inferior good. Okay, I know you guys. If you guys, some of you live around campus, you go to campus with your friends partying in a surrounding campus restaurant and bars. But you win a lottery, you might be hanging out in a much higher class restaurants and bars, you know. So you're gonna shun these low quality bars around, right? Okay. Someone one time was asking me, I was debating with a student in the class, and they were asking me, I asked them, okay, actually me, I asked them a question. Between Jimmy John's sandwiches and Subway, which one would you regard as inferior? So the class was split in half. Some people love Jimmy John's sandwiches. Some people love Subway. So, and also remember that what is considered inferior to consumers sometimes could be a subjective concept. Some people might even view, you know, even if their income goes up, they will eat a lot of fast food. They just, you know, so that means that they don't feel fast food is a what? It's an inferior good. So some goods, it could be a subjective thing. Okay, but overall, what I'm saying is that inferior goods are goods where if your income goes up, you buy less of those goods. Normal goods is when your income goes up, you buy more of those goods. But inferior goods, you're going to buy less instead. So that means for inferior goods, we can represent that with a diagram. So for an increase in income, this is what your inferior good demand will look like. So this is my P, this is Q. So let's say this is D1, this is P1, and Q1. Okay, so for inferior good, when the price of this, when the income of the consumer rises, they are going to decrease the demand for these goods. So that means that the demand curve is going to shift to the left, to D2. So the demand less of the product. Then we say the good is inferior. Okay, so that's one way that income can affect the demand for goods. It will affect depending on whether the good is normal or the good is inferior. And then the second factor that we're going to I discuss them here for inferior goods and normal goods. Okay, although I might not have drawn them. So if iPads are normal good, when income increase, the demand curve for iPads will shift to the answer. That's clear. We just talked about it will shift to the right. That answer is A. Higher incomes increase the demand for a normal good. That's what we talked about here. We drew it right here. Okay. If you thought this was the iPad was a normal good, then the increase in what? The increase in the consumer income will drive up the demand for iPads. So they'll shift the demand curve to the right. Okay. Okay, the second factor that will affect the demand curve, will shift the demand curve left or right, is population. An increase in the population will increase the demand generally. Okay. But a shift in the subpopulation might change the demand for specific goods and services. I'm going to give you 2 examples on that. Let me see. The increase in population, you think about like San Marcos. If you came here like 60 years ago, this was a very small town. Very few students enrolled in the university, maybe less than 10,000. Okay? So that when you think about like restaurants, because there were few people, the demand for food was low. But because the town has since grown, the city has grown big because of the student enrollment and the development around the city, more people are moving town. That means the demand for food has gone up. That's why you see many restaurants popping up in San Marcos, which was not the case some 60 years or 40, 50 years ago. So this is a no-brainer, and an increase in the population is going to shift the demand curve to the right. And an increase in the population in general is going to shift the demand curve to the right. A decrease is going to shift to the left. But when you talk about a shift in the subpopulation, we're talking about subpopulation could be maybe the change in the demographic, like in terms of like age groups or gender. Because there are certain goods that are bought by, by old people who are retired. Okay, like I know a lot of you are going to be thinking about contemplating about starting a business. You are not going to start a business that makes high heel shoes in a town and expect to sell those shoes in a city where more than 80% of the population are what? Above the age of 80 years old. 80-year-olds don't wear high heels anymore. Okay, so that's what I'm talking about, the subpopulation. Okay, it could be age, could be driven by age, could be driven by gender, those kind of stuff. So then there might be specific goods that appeal to people above a certain age or below a certain age. The Generation Z there may be products that Generation Z want to buy. Okay, so if Generation Z population in an area is high, then the demand for a specific good that Generation Z might want to buy goes up. Okay. Okay, the third factor, and here's where I want you to pay now the most attention. The third factor which affects the demand, whether demand curve shifts to the right or the left, depends on whether the goods are substitute. Okay? So a substitute is a good that can be consumed instead of another good. Okay? So I can give examples of substitutes here. When you brush your teeth in the morning, you either use Colgate or Close-Up. If you find me, if anybody finds me brushing my teeth in the morning, putting Colgate and Close-Up in the same toothpaste, that's not normal. If I'm using one particular product, Colgate, I better not be using the second one because they're substitutes. Examples could include like Diet Coke and Pepsi and what and regular Coke. They're substitutes. There are numerous examples of substitutes. Well, what else could be a substitute? Classic example is if you live 20 miles from camp, maybe 5 miles around Texas State, you either come to school riding in a bus or you drive your own car. It's not possible for you to ride in a bus at the same time driving your car. It's just not feasible. So going to school every morning in a bus and driving in your own car is a substitute. Those are substitutes. If I'm driving my car, I better not be in the bus. If I'm in the bus, I better not be in the car. Okay. So now think about it. If the price of driving to school goes up, okay, that means you could think about the price could be in terms of maybe gasoline because of higher gasoline prices, or price of the car has gone up. That means it increased the cost of driving to school, or traffic, I don't know what you could think about it, but it was in terms of gasoline prices. That means many students who go to Texas State will choose to ride in a bus instead. See? So that means an increase in the price of a substitute good like driving to school is going to lead to an increase in the demand for the second good, which is riding in the bus. So that's what substitutes do. Okay. All right. So let's talk about here. So here's an example. I'm talking about natural gas here. Okay. A decrease in the price of natural gas reduces the demand for its substitute like oil. So the second diagram, that's a market for oil. This is a market for natural gas. If you think that natural gas and oil are substitutes because they're all energy, but I kind of don't like that example, can be confusing. Anyway, but that's what I'll do another example. So let's assume that the price of natural gas was $55. This was a quantity demanded at $55, 5. Okay. And then let's say the price of per unit of the price of a barrel of oil was $50, and this was a quantity that is demanded at that price. Now, what I'm saying is that suppose there's a decrease in the price of natural gas. When the price of natural gas decreases from $55 to $20, that means more people will start buying natural gas because it's cheaper. And that means if oil prices does not change, now oil becomes an expensive product. And yet oil is a substitute. Natural gas is a substitute for oil. So this market has attracted this additional 20 customers. Whatever, the 20 additional gallons natural quantity is going to be. That means there's going to be a reduction in the demand for what? For oil. So that the demand curve for oil is going to shift to the left. Okay. But let me do another example with that, which I like to incorporate here to even solidify your understanding better on what the change in the price of a substitute affect the demand for the second good. So we talked about driving to Texas State. Let's say driving to school every morning versus taking a bus. Those are substitutes. You better not be in both. It's not possible. You can drive your car at the same time you ride in a bus. Okay, so two goods are substitutes if the use of one precludes you from using the second good. That's just clear. You can define it that way. But to economists, we like to define in terms of prices. That two goods are substitute if an increase in the price of one leads to an increase in the demand for the second good, or if a decrease in the price of one leads to a decrease in the demand for the second good. Okay, so let's say here, driving to school. Let's say this is a market for driving to school. We're gonna do the demand curve here. Price you pay anytime you drive to school in your car. That could be in terms of how much gas you put in your car. Okay, so let's say it costs you $5, or let's just say $10 to drive to school every day. This is, I'll just say this is Q. Let's say the number of students at Texas State who will drive to school are 20,000. 20,000. So 20,000 students will drive to school. So we are at this point A on this demand curve. And let's look at the number of students. Let's say the number of students are equally split. Let's say there are 40,000 students who attend Texas State. So this is a market. So this is a market for driving to school. This is a market for taking the bus. Remember, even though taking a bus might be free because that's built into your tuition already, maybe there's no free things cost you something because buses stop everywhere. Maybe you might miss class, you know. Let's say we can quantify that cost. Okay, let's assume that at the beginning of time, let's say it costs you $10 too when you ride in a bus. So that's a demand curve for riding in the bus. So this is point A. This is we can say 20,000 students will take the bus every morning to school. Now, suppose the price of gasoline goes up, jumps to like say $15. You know, maybe like to $3. And plus other additional costs, the wear and tear of your car. Let's say now it's gonna cost you 15. The price of gasoline is now $3.20, maybe. Now it costs you about $15 to drive to school. So the price of driving to school has gone up. So from the law of demand, an increase in the price of a good leads to a decrease in the quantity demanded. So you're going to, in this market, you're going to move along the same demand curve. See that? You're going to move from point A to point B. So that means, let's say 5,000 fewer students will drive to their own cars. Only 15,000 students will drive to school in their car. So because the price of driving has gone up, that leads to 5,000 fewer students driving to school in their own car. So the question is, the 5,000 fewer students who are no longer driving their cars, where do they find themselves? They'll find themselves taking a bus. So we're assuming that suppose the price of taking a bus to school has not changed. So an increase in the price of driving your car to school is going to lead to an increase in the demand for taking a bus. The demand curve is going to shift to the right. So those 5,000 students, fewer students who are no longer driving their own vehicles to school will find themselves in the bus. So the number of Texas State University students who will ride in a bus will increase to 25,000. So they see that's how those markets are related. And the converse is true. If the price of driving to school had fallen, let's say to $5, it only costs only $5. That means more students will drive to school. You just read it on a demand curve. If this was $5, see that so maybe 25,000 students, 5,000 more students will drive their car to school. Because driving to school has become cheaper. If riding in a bus has not changed, the cost has not changed, that will shift the demand curve to the left. So you can see that would lead to maybe 15,000 students taking the bus. So 5,000 fewer students will take the bus to school. So again, in summary, two goods are substitutes if an increase in the price of one leads to an increase in the demand for the second good, or if a decrease in the price of one good leads to a decrease in the demand for the second good, then we say those two goods are what? Are substitutes. Okay. So that's point number. So we have discussed that already. That substitute, how the price of substitutes affect the demand for goods and services. Okay. The second factor that will affect the demand is the price of substitutes. So let's talk about substitutes. No, complements. So goods can be either substitute. If they are not substitute, they are going to be complements. So for complements, price of complementary goods. What are complementary goods? So we're going to define here. I'm going to define them in two ways, in a layperson way and then in economic way. So two goods are complements. Two goods are complements if they must be used concurrently mean used at the same time. May use at the same time or together. They may be used together to satisfy a particular purpose. Then we say those goods are complements. They complement each other. They go together. Or in economic definition, we're going to say two goods are complements. Two goods are complements if an increase in the price of one good leads to a decrease in the demand for the second good. Then we say those two goods are what? A complement. Or you could say, and vice versa. That means if there's a decrease in the price of one good, that should lead to an increase in the demand for the second good. Okay, so let's give examples of complementary goods. You know them a lot. Examples of complements. One, if you like hunting, you pick your rifle to go hunt animals in the jungle. Rifle and bullets, they go together. You go hunting and you go with a rifle without bullets, you may not shoot. So these are complementary goods. Two, you know them, pen and ink. See, I'm writing using a pen and ink. They go together. Three, car and gasoline. Those go together. Okay. There's so many. Example you can think about. Okay. Bread and butter. Okay. Five. So many examples you can give for what complements are. What are examples of complements again? We say bread and butter. Maybe you can talk about hot dogs and buns. Hot dog buns and hot dog itself, they go together. So that's just the way it is. So now let's look at it, what we just described. So let's look at how a change in the price of one of the complementary good affect the demand for the second good. So let's say here's a market for cars, and here's a market for gasoline. I'm talking about only cars that use gas, not electric vehicles. Okay, so if we draw the demand here, price P, Q stands for quantity. Let's say this is my demand one. And let's say the average price of cars in San Marcos was $20,000. I don't know why. $20,000 a car. And let's say maybe 10 million cars are on the road. People buying 10 million cars. And let's put the market for gasoline here. Price of gasoline, quantity of gasoline. The demand for gasoline also slopes downwards. Let's say the price of gasoline was maybe $3 a gallon. So we can say maybe, I don't know, maybe 1 million gallons of gasoline are demanded every week or every month, whatever quantity you want to use there. So this is point A. Okay, we can call this point A prime. So now, suppose the price of cars start to go up. You know, with COVID, after COVID happened, the price of vehicles in America, including used cars, have been going up a lot. Suppose the average price of cars goes up to $25,000, jump to $25,000. So from the law of demand, the higher the price of a good, the lower is the quantity demanded. So if I connect that 25 to the demand curve here, I read the quantity down here. So that maybe 2 million fewer people will drive vehicles. So only 8 million vehicles will be demanded. Now, because fewer vehicles are on the road, that means less quantity of gasoline will be demanded. So an increase in the price of cars that led to a decrease in the number of cars being driven is going to shift the demand for gasoline to the left. That's right. Because since fewer people are now can afford cars, fewer gallons of gasoline will be demanded. So the demand for gasoline is going to shift to the left, to D2. Maybe instead of people driving 1 million gallons of gasoline a week, they'll reduce the quantity to maybe 800,000 gallons. See? So that's how we analyze how the price of a complementary good affects the demand for the second good. And what about if the price of cars had fallen? If the price of cars had fallen, like say to 15,000, then the number of people buying cars would have increased. We would be on this point on a demand curve. So more people would have, maybe 12,000 million cars would be demanded. Because there are more number of cars on the road, the demand for gasoline would go up, would shift to the right. So you would be shifting this to the right instead. Okay, so that is how complements affect the demand for goods. I talk about, I gave an example. Let's do some example here. I told you the case of substitutes. If orange juice and apple juice are substitutes, an increase in the price of orange juice will, because think about it, if people treat orange juice and apple juice as substitutes, meaning that if the price of one good changes, people are going to buy the other one, because we're assuming that we're holding the price of the, maybe say, apple juice constant. So an increase in the price of orange juice is going to increase the demand for the second good, which is what? Apple juice. So A is the correct choice. Okay, higher price for orange juice will cause some people to substitute the now lower price apple juice, because this increases the demand for apple juice. So I talk about price of complements. Complements are things that go well together. Those are goods that I already talked about it. These are two goods that complements when they can be used concurrently, meaning that they can be used together to satisfy a particular purpose. So that means a decrease or a drop in the price of a complementary good will increase the demand for the complementary good, for the second good. No, it will increase the demand for complementary good, but that's going to decrease the what? The demand for the second good. That's right. Yeah, I already explained that in this graph here. If you go back here, that's what we said. We just talked about. Gasoline and cars are complementary goods. So an increase in the price, if this were to drop, that means that's going to lead to what? If the price of cars are decreased, then there would be a decrease in the what? In the price of, no, they're complement. So if the price of cars goes up, that means fewer people buy cars, then the demand for gasoline is going to fall. But if the price of the cars had fallen, that means more people would have bought cars. The demand for gasoline will go up. So it's kind of like an inverse correlation between price, one good affecting the what? Negatively correlated to the demand for the second good. The fifth factor which affect demand after complementary good is expectations. Okay, and expectations can be right now I talked about it with regard to supply. When buyers are expecting a reduction in future supply, that means this one could be say expectation of a future, when they're expecting that there's a decrease in the supply of products in the future. That means they're expecting the price in the future to what? To go up. They're going to buy more today. So when you say you're expecting a reduction in future supply of goods, that means the goods are going to be more expensive in the future because of supply chain issues. Okay, so people want to buy today when it's cheap. Okay, so an expected future price increase due to people expecting that the supply of goods are going to fall in the future will lead to an increase in what? In demand today, and vice versa. But when buyers are expecting the supply to increase in the future, that means they're expecting a lower price in the future. They're going to postpone their purchase. They're going to decrease the demand for the goods today. So an expected decrease in supply leads to an increase in what? In demand today. Unexpected increase in supply leads to an decrease in what? In supply. So we can go either way. And then the last, maybe perhaps one last but not the least, is gonna be taste. Taste can also be, you can think about this in terms of quality or preferences for goods. Quality or preference. This is no brainer. If you come to campus every day and you go to the library, you're studying every day for 5 hours. And you go to a coffee shop in a library and they always make very good coffee. So you always drink like 3 cups a day when you're staying long in the library to stay awake to study. Let's say you come tomorrow and the person who was making coffee in the library had a bad day. She was not, they were not feeling good. Maybe they come with a bad attitude. And somehow somebody accidentally mixed salt with coffee. It doesn't taste any good anymore. So the quality has gone down. So even though you used to drink 3 cups a day, you may not even drink a half a cup because of the quality. So when there's a decrease in the quality of the product, the demand goes down. The demand shifts to the left. That's pretty straightforward. When consumers are expecting, the preference of consumer for the good increases, or they think the quality of the good has improved, they buy more. So the demand curve will shift to the right. Okay. Okay. So those are some factors that are kind of I would discuss. That those are the factors that affect the demand for goods. But remember, as I said in the beginning, the market is comprised of both demand and supply side. So up to this point, this concludes our discussion about the demand itself, the demand side of the market. We have talked about the main determinant of demand is price. When price changes, you move along the what? Along the same demand curve. Okay, and then we talked about, now we've been discussing the factors that shift the demand curve left and right. So now let's go and look at the supply side of the market. So when you're studying a market like a market for oil, you don't only look at the demand side. That means you're only studying a halfway. You also have to look at the supply side of the market. So let's look at the supply curve. The supply curve is going to be a function that shows the quantity supplied at different prices. So the quantity supplied is a quantity that sellers are willing and able to sell at a particular price. Okay. I want to be very clear with you guys. Consumers, buyers of a good and sellers of a good want different things. In fact, I don't know whether you have ever thought about that. There's some hidden fight between buyers and sellers. When you go to the mall and you're staring at a beautiful pair of shoes, which is priced at $200, in your mind as a buyer, you're saying, I wish it was only $50. I would buy even more. But the person, the guy in the mall who is selling that shoe, in his mind, he's saying, I wish it was $1,000, not 200. I would actually make more money. See? So while buyers want lower prices for the whatever they want to buy, sellers want higher prices, because the main goal of a producer or a seller is to profit maximize. And you maximize profit when you sell your goods at a relatively what? Decent price, higher price. So that means sellers are willing to sell more of their product when the price is high. Meanwhile, buyers are willing to buy less of a product when the price is high. That's why the demand curve was downward sloping, but the supply curve is going to be upward sloping. Okay, so that, so this leads us to what we call the law of supply. Let me talk about it here first. Open the slide here. So the law of supply is that when the price is high, or the price increases, this leads to an increase in supply, to an increase in the quantity supply, increase in quantity supply, because sellers they want to increase sell more of their goods when the price is high, and vice versa. Vice versa means when the price is low, it leads to a decrease in the quantity supplied of a good. Okay, so that means there's a positive relationship or positive correlation between the price of a good and the quantity supplied of a good. Okay, see, that's, the demand curve, there's a negative relationship between price and quantity demanded. But when it comes to supply, there's a positive correlation, meaning that the supply curve is positively sloped. So again, if I put quantity supplied on this axis, just to say quantity supplied, and I put price on this axis, the supply curve is upward sloping. You can label it S. Okay? Meaning that if the price is low, nobody makes money, and they're less willing to supply their product. They're going to less supply. The quantity supplied is low. When the price increases to P2, see that? They are willing to sell more, supply more. So there's an increase in quantity supply. So you're moving from point A to point B on the same supply curve. Okay? That's as far as supply goes. And so I think I have some diagram here. Yeah, which I talk about the low supply anyway. So I talk about for this one here. See, so a supply curve can be read horizontally, just like we talked about demand curve can be read horizontal and vertically. When you're reading it horizontally, you're reading quantity. When you're reading it vertically, you're reading price. So horizontally means at a given price, how much are suppliers willing to sell? For example, when the price is 20, that means suppliers are willing to supply 30 million barrels of oil per day. Okay, when you're reading it vertically, that means to produce a given quantity, to produce 30 barrels of oil per day, what price must sellers be paid for? So sellers are seeking what? $20 per barrel. They must be paid $20 per barrel. So as the oil price so that's the law of supply, I already talked about it. As the price of oil rises, it becomes profitable to extract from even more costly sources. That's right. Because people, the oil companies want to make more money by producing more and selling it when the price is high. Okay, they're gonna find different ways, maybe even doing like offshore drilling, which sometimes costly. As the price rises, the quantity supplied increase as well. Okay, so so now you can see that this is what we call a supply schedule. When the price of oil is $55 per barrel, the suppliers of oil are willing to supply up to 50 million barrels per day. And then when the price drops from $55 to $20 per barrel of oil, see, the suppliers are willing to decrease they want to decrease their supply from 50 to 30. See, it's a positive correlation. They move in the same direction. As price decreases, quantity supply decreases. As price increases, quantity supplied increases. That's why the supply curve is upward sloping. So here's some self-check from this basic whatever. At what price will producers be willing to supply 50 units? So just match it. You're just going to draw for you. So there's 50 units here. So you draw that up to the supply curve, and then you read the price on the other side. So they're willing to, so the correct answer is going to be A. They're willing to what? The price that they're willing to supply 50 units is going to be $10. Okay. And then let's proceed. Now let's talk about what about producer surplus. So now you remember we talked about consumer surplus. The consumer surplus was a difference by which a buyer was willing to, the maximum price that a buyer was willing to pay for a product and the actual price that they actually pay for it. And we derive the demand curve from the consumer surplus. Producer surplus is the other way around, is the difference between the market price and the minimum price at which a producer will be willing to sell a particular quantity of their product. Remember, every sale of a product has got what we call the reserve price. If you're making a smartphone, it costs you a certain amount of dollars to make that iPhone. So when you want to sell that iPhone, you at least want to recoup the cost of production. You don't want to sell at a price below the cost you made it. If it costs you $50 to make a smartphone, at least the minimum price you're willing to receive for that iPhone should be $50. At least you want to recover your cost. So the producer surplus, let's say the minimum price that a particular seller was willing to receive for their product was like, say, $50. But after taking their product to the market, they find that the market price is actually $70. So $70, the difference between the market price and the price they were willing, the minimum price they were willing to receive, is what we call the producer surplus. So the producer surplus is going to be located above the what? It's going to be located above the supply curve. Okay. See, but below the market price. So if the market price, say, is $40, for example, we know that the area of the triangle, we're going to turn this into a triangle. The shaded blue is going to be your producer surplus. Okay. And the way we calculate the producer surplus, the same way we calculate the consumer surplus. You're just going to take the area of the triangle, this triangle. If this was a triangle, this triangle here. If you know this area, yeah. So let's say this turned out to be a triangle. The way drawing here is not very clear. Let me see. I didn't do that. Okay, so let's say this was a triangle. Eventually, we normally turn this into a kind of like that. Okay, we kind of draw this. I drew this line to be a little crooked, but if it's a straight line, you come out with this triangle here. Okay, so the base of this triangle, if we know this, let's say this point was 10, the base of this triangle would be this guy here, would be 10, from 10 to 40, that's 30. And let's say if this is 80, then the height of this triangle would be 80. So you use the same formula, base times height divided by 2. You calculate the area of this triangle, which is above the supply curve but below the market price. Okay. Now, let's talk about shifting the supply curve. So you can see that just like price is a main determinant of demand, price is also the main determinant of supply, but not the only determinant. Okay. So we already established that when the price of a good goes up, the sellers of the good they're willing to supply more of the good because that's when they make the most money. So that means price is the most important driver of supply, or quantity supply, but it's not the only determinant of supply. There are other determinants let me give you an example. Technology, for example. When a firm discovers new technology, they are able to produce more output. So they're going to supply more. Lousy technology, they produce less. Okay? The number of producers. Okay, you have many producers of a good in the marketplace, we supply more. Remember when Apple was the first company to start producing iPads. Eventually, other companies joined to start producing an alternative, those gadgets, like Samsung Galaxy Tabs, LG, and others. Because the number of producers of the similar product, you're gonna go up. Classic example is before the Vietnamese War in the late 60s, Vietnam used not to be a major coffee producing country. For some reason, after the Vietnamese War, Vietnam started massively producing coffee. So they became a major supply of coffee beans in a national coffee market. So that means the supply of coffee, the global supply of coffee went up because somehow Vietnam joined and started massively producing coffee as well. Okay. So now there's just like we talked about the difference between a change in quantity demanded and a change in demand. We're also going to talk about a change in quantity supplied and a change in supply. Okay, same concept, but here we'll just with supply. So there's a fundamental difference between a change in quantity supplied. So a change in quantity supplied is due to a change in the goods on price. Like when the price of oil goes up, oil companies will increase quantity supply. So, and it involves a movement along the same supply curve. Okay, then that's what we call what? A change in quantity supply is due to when we say an increase in quantity supply, that is due to an increase in the price. When we are more specific, a decrease in quantity supplied is attributed to a decrease in price. When the price decreases, you're going to move downwards on the supply curve. If the price increases, you move upwards on the supply curve. So basically, that's what I'm saying. You have something like this. You got price here, you got quantity here. Supply curve is upward sloping, right? So when this is P1, so this is Q1, this is point A on the supply curve. So when price increases to P2, you're going to move along the same supply curve to point B. So an increase in price leads to an increase in quantity supplied. We invoke the word quantity. What about if the price had decreased from P2 to P1? Then you're going to be moving downwards the supply curve. That would lead to a decrease in quantity supply. Meanwhile, on the other hand, a change in supply, remember here we are invoking the word quantity. But when you just say a change in supply, that is not due to changing price. It's not due to the change in the goods on price. So a change in supply involves shifting the entire supply curve. Shifting the entire supply curve, whether to the right or to the left, depending on the direction of change. Entire supply curve. It is due to other factors which affect supply of goods, which affect supply rather than price. So that means if we all price constant, the supply, producers can still supply more or less of the product. That means what is driving, making them supply more or less is not price. Could be something else. Could be technology changes. Could be an increase in the number of producers. Changes in input prices. Okay, we'll talk about that. Okay, so I can draw these two concepts just like we did for demand on one graph to illustrate that. So for the matter of illustration, to illustrate the difference, we can say, okay, well, if this is my initial supply curve, this is quantity, this is price. So this is my supply curve. Could call it S1. So let's say that my price here was P1. that correspond to this Q1. So I would be at point A on the supply curve, right? And then when the price increases to P2, the quantity supplied also is going to increase. So we call this quantity change in quantity an increase in quantity supply because it's due to a change in price. We move to point B. But remember, we could still producers could still supply increasing amount of quantity Q1 to Q2 without price ever changing. So what we're saying here is that what if price stayed the same at P1, but we could still end up at a point like point C? That means the entire supply curve would have shifted to the right, to S2. And this now, a movement from point A to point C, is you can no longer say that sellers are increasing their supply because of change in price. No, price has not changed. That means there are other factors that might be driving that supply. And I mentioned them. Maybe there could be increase in technology. Maybe changes in raw material goods. Maybe the changes in inputs, like raw material goods are going down. The cost is going down, making them produce more. Labor costs going down, wages going down can make companies produce more because it's cheaper to produce when you hire labor at what? At a low wage, or when you buy inputs or raw material goods at a low cost, that is going to make you supply more. Okay. And on the other, so when the supply curve shifts to the right, that's what we call an increase in supply. So this case that are represented, so from A to C, movement from A to C is what we call increase in supply. When the supply curve shifts to the right. But C to A, if we shift the supply curve like that, C to A is decrease in supply. When you shift the supply curve to the left, that's a decrease in supply. Remember, you no longer use the word quantity. It's just decrease. You can't say decrease in quantity supply. That's wrong. Decrease in quantity supplied is when the price is the one changing. When the price decreases, that leads to a decrease in quantity supply. That's when you're moving along the same supply curve. Okay. Now, the question then is, what are those factors that shift the supply curve left or right? So let's go and discuss those factors. So I talk about this here now. This is when the supply curve, this is in the case of an increase in what? An increase in supply. The supply curve shifts to the right, shifts the curve to the right. At each price, producers are willing to sell more. At each quantity, producers are willing to accept a lower price. That's what it is. And then decrease in supply is when they shift the supply curve to the left. At each price, sellers will offer less. At each quantity, sellers will demand a higher price. That's right. So you see that. So here are the factors that shift the supply curve left or right. One of them is no-brainer, technological innovations and changes in input price. Okay, maybe we can discuss one at a time. I cannot lump all two of them at once, but we could say, let's start with technology. So let's say one, technological advancement. An increase in technology, what we're calling technological advancement. When technology advances, that means better technology allows us to produce more goods with same inputs. Okay, that means you may not vary the number of workers in your facility and the amount of capital you're using, because technology has gotten better. It allows you to produce more goods using the same inputs. So in this case, and technological advancement is going to shift the supply curve to the right. So this is my S1. This was my price, Q1, P1. Okay. So this is going to shift my what? Supply curve to the right, to S2. So you're going to move from, so then remember, price has not changed. So we're going to draw like this. We're going to end up at this point on this new supply curve. So there's going to be an increase in supply from Q1 to Q2. Move from point A to point B. Okay. Lousy technology. I don't know. You can find an example where lousy technology will shift the supply curve to the left. And then changes in input prices. I want to discuss that separately. Kind of alarm them. 2, changes in input prices. Inputs are things that we use to produce output. They're raw material goods used for producing output. You know that. So inputs could be things like labor costs. Labor is an input used to producing goods. Labor, when I say labor cost, I mean wages. Maybe the cost of capital, like interest rate. Maybe the cost of raw material goods. And raw material goods could also be the cost of energy. Many companies use different sources of energy. If energy cost is going up, like electricity, oil, that raises production costs. So in other words, you can just summarize it. You can say that an increase in input costs, okay, or input prices, in bracket you can say prices, increases production costs, leading to a decrease in supply. So the supply curve is going to shift to the left. In this case, leading to a decrease in supply. And vice versa. So vice versa means when these input prices or input costs are falling, that means production costs will fall as well. So companies will find it easier to produce more output. So supply is going to increase, will shift to the right. So a decrease in input prices like lower wages, lower cost of capital, lower cost of raw material goods, lower cost of energy, will decrease production costs, leading to an increase in supply, shifting the supply curve to the right. I talked about this already. Taxes and subsidies. If the government increases taxes on companies, on producers, on sellers of a good, that is going to inhibit their ability to produce goods and services. They're going to decrease supply. Taxes are a disincentive to production. Many businesses don't want to pay very high taxes on their what? On their products. You know that. So if you levy very high taxes, but if you give them subsidies are kind of like the opposite of taxation. Subsidy is the reverse of a tax. Like I know the US government gives a lot of farm subsidies to American farmers. Okay? Guaranteed crop insurance, stuff like that. You know, that is going to increase supply. Subsidy is like a decrease in tax. It will shift the supply curve to the right. Expectations. So suppliers who expect price to increase will store goods for future sale and sell less today. So that's true. So if you are the business person and somebody tells you that, oh, prices 6 months or 1 year from today will be higher than it is today. And then what the smart business strategy is that you produce less or you hoard some of your goods. You don't sell them. You don't bring them to the market today because you don't make any money today. You wait until tomorrow when the price goes up. That's when you want to sell. So unexpected future price increase, even though the price today has not changed, but sellers are expecting the prices in the future to rise, will lead them to cutting supply today. It doesn't make any good business sense for you to start, supplying a lot of your goods in the marketplace when the price is low, when you know tomorrow is going to be what price going to go up. So unexpected future price increase leads to a decrease in price today. An unexpected future price decrease will lead to an increase in price today. So it's an increase in supply today. So when companies instead are expecting price to fall in the future, that means they don't make any money. They will rather sell today, so they're going to increase supply today for any expectation of a future price decrease. So the supply curve in that case will shift to the right today. But when they're expecting price in the future to increase, then they are going to decrease supply today, leading to a shift from the supply curve to the left. So it's pretty straightforward, expectations. And then there's also entry or exit of producers. So when new firms enter an industry, that leads to, this is straightforward, leads to an increase in supply. I gave you the case of what? Of Vietnam. So Vietnam was not a major coffee producing country until after the Vietnamese War. Then they started massively increasing what? Global supply of coffee as well. So supply goes up overall when you have many producers instead of fewer producers in the market. Changes in opportunity cost. So an increase in opportunity cost shift the supply curve up and to the left. Okay, opportunity cost is a what? Is that's the cost, the best valued alternative that must be given up when a choice is made. Okay, so most of the time is that when opportunity cost of producing a good goes up, the cost is going up. Your next best alternative, is valued more, increasing. Then you're going to cut supply. Okay. If the price of wheat increases, the opportunity cost of growing soybean increases. That's right. Okay, if you think like wheat and soybeans, a farmer was producing like wheat and soybean. Okay. And then the price of wheat increases. What do you think is going to happen? Companies are going to produce more wheat because that's where they make money. So that means the opportunity cost of growing soybean has gone up. They're not going to want to produce, but when they produce soybeans, the price of soybean is low. They don't make any money. It's going to cost them a lot. So they rather switch to producing what? Wheat. So if the price of wheat increases, the opportunity cost of soybeans is going to increase, meaning that the supply of soybean is going to shift to the left. It's going to decrease. So some farmers will shift away from producing soybeans and start producing wheat, meaning that the supply of soybean is going to shift to the left. Because in this case, wheat becomes a profitable crop compared to soybeans. If you grow more soybeans, you don't make any money because it's the price of wheat which is going up. So it makes more economic sense for a farmer to switch to producing more wheat, okay, and decrease the what? The supply of soybeans. So it's some fact check for you, self-check. Suppose a new technology reduces the time it takes to assemble a car. How would this affect the supply of cars? This is no-brainer. Okay. A new tech, that means it's gonna the supply curve for cars will shift to the right. It will shift the supply to the right. So the correct answer is A. Producers will be able to supply more cars at the current price because it's new tech. We don't talk about technology. So here are the takeaways from what we have discussed so far in chapter 3. We talked about a demand curve, which shows how customers respond to higher prices by buying less and to lower prices by buying more. We talked about a supply curve, which shows how producers respond to higher prices by producing more and to lower prices by producing less. The difference between the market price and the maximum a consumer is willing to pay is what we call the consumer surplus, right? And then we also talk about the producer surplus. Okay. Okay. So the other thing that you need to know before I wrap this chapter up is that up to this point, you need to know factors which affect supply. The factors which affect supply do not affect demand. Okay? Like, for example, when you're talking about changes in technology, that is affecting the supply side of the market. Okay? When we're talking about the number of